25. Continue what was started from chapter 24. It's also running out what we started talking about when we refocused on Kikar V'Lecha. Tanya is based on Kikar V'Lecha. Then went through the whole, this is what you're made up of. This tzaddik, Beinoni, Rasha, all the different things. And then we revisited Kikar V'Lecha to say, no, it's not just near to you and accessible to you, but it's actually very near, very accessible to you because it's a part of you. This love and fear of God, the Ava Mitzvot, etc. That's when we started going into that whole thing. So go back to chapters 16, 17, 18, whatever. So this is kind of round out the section, and then 26 and moving on. How do we deal with the challenge of life that want to slow down our train of awesome? Much to look forward to. Very exciting. Back to chapter 25. So chapter 25 is rounding out what we started with chapter 24, talking about what actually does a sin do. What actually happens when a sin is committed. We went through this whole thing with talking about love of God is the desire for connection, and fear of God is this fear of separation from God, and the Ava Mitzvot that we have is something that's always going to keep us bound up. We're never going to want to part from Him, etc. All these kinds of things. Then we had to understand what that actually meant. And that's when we went through the whole thing about what does it mean that God created the world. God is the only existing entity. We say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. One, we don't use the word Yachid, we use the word Echad. Because Yachid, it's a singularity, which seems to make more sense. But the word Echad is specific because even though Echad implies that there might be Shtayim, Shalosh, Arba, that there's going to be more after that, what it's saying is that even though it seems like there's a multiplicity within creation, God is still one. It is still all only God. Which brought us to the whole thing with the turtle shell. We're seeing the shell and we want to know where the turtle's gone. Where is the turtle? We can't see him. Well, because we can't. We have to have reward and punishment, different things like that. We spoke about how doing a mitzvah is fulfilling God's will, and Torah study is God's wisdom and the kind of unity that's created for both of these things. And then we start talking about what happens when someone transgresses. We say, it's not such a big deal. Because what we do is we start to equivocate and say, no. Bowing down to idols, that's terrible. We would never deny God's oneness. But maybe doing a different transgression is not such a big deal. It's okay. Because this is the spirit of folly that comes over us. We call it spirit of folly because it's nonsense to start saying there's worse sins and then there's less worse sins. It's like, I only punched you in the face, okay? I could have been wearing brass knuckles when I punched you in the face. Yeah, but you still punched me in the face. Oh, no, but I could have hurt you worse. Okay, but you still hurt me. Just because it could have been worse doesn't mean what you did wasn't a terrible thing. This is kind of thing that we do with transgression, because if not, we wouldn't be able to transgress, of course. If we fully understood what was going on, the terror that occurred in the relationship with God, of course we would never transgress, because we would never allow for that. How can there ever be a moment of denial? I don't deny God. I believe in God. Yeah, well, you just did X. No, that's not the same thing. In the moment of transgression, it is the same thing. Even though after the fact, there are different kinds of punishments, consequences, cleansing, repairs to rectify what was done. That actually catches up basically to last time. We also had the very inspiring words about how because a person has free choice, when they transgress in that moment, they fall lower than whatever the lowest parts of creation are. Because the low parts of creation are only being what they've been created to be. We can't expect them to be anything else. You can't expect a dog to not be a dog. But when a person acts less than a dog, that's considered even worse. Now we come to chapter 25. Etc. At every moment, every hour, it is within a person's control, domain, ability, to turn aside, to push aside the ruach shtus and the forgetfulness from within him, and to remember and to reawaken the love of God that is within him. There was a similar message about a Beinoni, that a person at any time could decide they want to be a Beinoni. It's not something that we have, only after 40 years of PhD training can you now decide that you're a Beinoni. A person who wants to be a Beinoni just has to resolve, I'm going to be a Beinoni, and now I got to get into the program. You have a good resolution, you make it now. Why are you pushing it off if it's such a good resolution? So a Beinoni, anyone could decide at any moment, you know what? I'm going to commit. I'm going to try very, very hard, genuinely hard, to not be transgressing. I'm going to push away any negative thought, speech, action, anything that's not appropriate. I'm going to push it aside. So we're reiterating and re-emphasizing here that after we talk all the terrible things that occur and then we have this spirit of fall that comes over us, every single person, no matter who they are, has the ability to push it aside. At any time that they decide, I'm going to do this, I'm going to commit to this. Part of that is because it's part of you already. You don't have to go seeking tools that you already have. You have it. Where are you going to find what it's in you the whole time? So at any time you can decide, I am genuinely going to try to tap into it with real resolve. This whole section, which the first kind of half of this chapter talks about surmera, or turn away from evil, which obviously we see here that at any moment we could turn away to make the right decision. And then the next part is going to emphasize aseh tov. We're going to go back to what a mitzvah fully accomplishes. We're going to get into this whole thing here about teshuvah. First of all, we have to remember that the hidden love that we have, this avim sateris that we have, includes fear also. And fear is necessary for surmera. Fear is very necessary. If you love someone so much, you'll do a lot for them, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to be doing certain things. That's why fear is so important. On the other classes that I teach, they don't like when you talk about fear, because for them, fear equals fear of punishment. When we talk about in Tanya, we are specifically not talking about fear of punishment. And even punishment It's not even the exact term that we like to use because it's a consequence. It's a rectification. It's not like, oh, don't do this, God's going to strike you with lightning, and then the lightning strike has nothing to do with what was done. Whatever the transgression was, the rectification is in line basically with that, because what you have to do is rectify it. The point is that we're not talking about fear of punishment. The fear that we're speaking about is a fear of I don't want to be disconnected. It's a fear that leads to preservation. A feeling of smallness and a fear that leads to preservation. Because this is so important to me and this is everything to me. I don't want any of it to get messed up. You get a new car and no one's allowed to scratch it, eat on it, don't breathe. It's that sort of thing, is I don't want any of this to get ruined. That's not coming from love, that's coming from fear. We have to remember that the hidden love that we have within us has an element of fear also. And we need that. We need that for the Surah part. So we go into this whole thing here with teshuvah. It says, even though we know that we have teshuvah that can rebind us, we have the rope, and if the strand of a rope gets frayed or even cut, God forbid, we can always tie it back up again. We can repair the rope. But even though we know that an individual should not, would not, if they could really sense it, accept even a momentary separation from Hashem. Just because like, oh, you'll fix it later. Yeah, but what about that moment of separation that occurred? I can't even have that at all. I will not risk it at all. I will not go there at all. Like, don't worry if you hit them. You'll say sorry afterwards. Yeah, but then there's still the moment of pain where I hit someone. So we won't have that at all. He recoils in fear from anything which can sever the connection. Because this is so real to me, and I really have the sense of what this connection is, anything that's going to risk it, fear draws me back from it. Going too close to the edge. If you've ever been on a hike somewhere and you're a little bit high up and you want to take a picture, that instinct that tells you to pull back is fear. Fear tells you, whoa, 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 back, 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 back. As soon as there's something that's going to threaten the connection, fear kicks in. It says, whoa, 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 back off. Back off of this behavior. Don't go there. We want this. We want to use this because love doesn't do that. Fear does that for us, and way more effectively. So even to the point of the cost of life itself, as in a recoil from this separation to the extent of what we call Mesiras Nefesh. What do we want to do? We want to apply this to what's quote unquote a minor transgression. Because even a minor transgression results in a momentary separation. Denounce God, bow down to that, Allah, whatever. People see that, no, this is a big transgression because this is a big moment of separation. What the Alter Rebbe is trying to point out with this chapter is that there's no difference between big or small moment of separation because it's still a separation. It doesn't matter how quote unquote big or small it is, there is separation that occurs and fear is supposed to keep us from that. So the same way that we would recoil and hold back from what would lead to Mesiras Nefesh, because like, oh, I would never denounce God, I would never bow down to an idol, I would never denounce my Judaism. We don't have to wait for that moment to use fear to pull us back, because we have to remember that even something that seems quote unquote minor to us still results in a momentary separation. Yeah, but I could do tshuva afterwards. But what about that moment of separation? It goes into the whole thing of if someone sins because they're relying on teshuvah, are they actually forgiven or not? So does Yom Kippur forgive for that? Do they have immediate forgiveness for that? Even if someone goes, God forbid, to something a very extreme thing. So it says they don't have forgiveness, but like the Alter Rebbe was like, yes, you do have forgiveness, just God's not going to help you. You're going to have to find it by yourself. This whole thing. Just so you know it exists in this chapter. The point is there is a moment of separation, and how can we have that? How can the same fear of separation, which leads to self-sacrifice rather than idolatry, also keep someone from a minor sin? The Alter Rebbe wants us to use the same fear. You have it on a high level, on an extreme level, so use it now and channel it for a lesser level, quote unquote. One causes lasting separation and one causes temporary separation. Because in our minds, they're different. Mesiras Nefesh, there's a reason for Mesiras Nefesh, because, oh, that's too far. But these other transgressions, it's just me and God. This is just my feeling in the moment. I was going through a tough time or whatever. By bearing it in mind, the Alter Rebbe wants us to use this to keep away from minor transgressions. Because thank God it's not a level of Mesiras Nefesh. If you would do it in the extreme, why can't you use it now for things that are smaller? This goes to what I was saying with the whole tshuva thing. Nothing can stand in the way of repentance. At the end of the day, especially now that we're looking at this, we may have experienced at one point, we may have actually transgressed at some point. So even with all that we're saying and the rope and the severing, and if someone sinned with relying on tshuva, okay, nothing can stand in the way of repentance. If a person decides that they're going to genuine teshuva is going to occur, then genuine teshuva can rectify. It's the bulldozer before all obstacles that try to prevent it. Now we know how we can use this fear of separation, because in remembering that it's separation, we don't have to rely on this moment of Mesiras Nefesh. We really internalize and remember, and we really feel that this is a separation. That fear keeps us from even minor transgression. I do not ever, not even for a second, want to deny or risk or harm my connection to God. You can think of any relationship that's important to you, and there's not even a moment that you want to jeopardize it. Oh no, I'll say sorry afterwards. That's not how you approach relationships. Now, Going to Aseh Tov. What do we do about Aseh Tov? Using the same kind of logic, we're going to now apply it to the positive. This kind of same thing about you would do Mesiras Nefesh for this thing, now let's do it in a positive kind of sense. How do we do Aseh Tov? We want to use that energy. How do we use it the positive? Be strong as a lion to overcome. Why? Because negative forces, they're going to try to weigh down the body, laziness. They're going to try to, no, I'm not in the mood. I don't want to. It bothers me so much. When someone's like, oh, can you get me a cup of water? I'm too lazy to go get it. I really don't like that terminology. If you want someone to get you the cup of water, just say it without being, yeah, I'm too lazy to go get it. As if that's okay. Oh, if I say that I'm lazy, then it's okay that I'm asking someone to do a favor that I could be doing myself right now because I'm 10 feet from the kitchen. Because when you start talking like that, you start using that for everything. Too lazy to be folding my laundry right now. Just be honest about the fact that you don't want to fold your laundry right now. Stop using laziness as the excuse. Trying to blame it on laziness as if it's, oh, if I'm lazy, then that's okay for me to not fold my laundry. It's like, you know what? I don't want to fold it right now, so I'm not gonna. So negative forces, which try to lead to transgression, they try to weigh the body down. What do you have to do? We have to overcome it. We gotta be strong as a lion to overcome it. We gotta pump ourselves up and be like, you will not stop me today. This is what it tells us. A man should always submit to the words of Torah like the ox to the yoke and the donkey to the load. Because studying Torah and committing to this Torah lifestyle is something that it requires actual toil. Lama Torah, that we're supposed to toil in Torah study. Because it actually requires effort from us. We can't skate and we can't coast. Especially because the other side is working double time and overtime to weigh us down. So we can't just pretend like it's negligent, the feeling of laziness or the feeling of not wanting to do something. It's not just, oh, because I'm in a mood right now. Where do you think the mood's coming from? The mood is coming from that which is trying to slow down our train of awesome. But that's why we have to overcome. We have to be strong. I was saying it to the high schoolers, where it was like, everybody likes to preach about stuff. Preaching is fine. Oh, you know what I used to tell to them? If they would talk while I was talking. Excuse me, do you like it when someone speaks when you're speaking? If you're trying to tell your friends something, do you want them to be talking over you? They're like, no. I'm like, so why are you talking right now? We do all make speeches about stuff. Now, no one wants to be on the other side of that because that sucks to be on the other side of that. But do you not talk about how you want people to be respecting you? So why are you not respecting other people right now? We ignore that fact, even though we all know it's true and we're all ready to tell it to other people, but we ignore it for ourselves because it's hard. We have an ideal and a standard. We know this is true. Most people, especially if you're a believer and you believe in God and you believe in Judaism, it's like, well, do you want to be a transgressor? No, I don't. Well, so then why do you transgress? Well, because sometimes, because I'm a human being, that's why. Fine, so at least we're being honest right now. That's also why this chapter is enjoining us and encouraging us and reminding us that it actually requires effort. Just because something is hard for us right now, first of all, it doesn't mean that we're on the wrong track. The fact that it's hard for us right now is because this is what it is. If it was so easy and so simple, then yeah, it's so obvious. Free choice kind of thing, the reward and punishment kind of thing. Here, Torah study and all this kind of stuff, it is hard. It is hard to commit ourselves to it. To say, oh, everybody should be honest. Then all of a sudden there's a moment where you might tell a little bit of a lie. What happened to all your speeches about honesty? No, this is different. No, I don't have to do it for this person. I don't even like them. What is that supposed to mean? Are you committed or not? The point is, that's why it's the ox to the yoke. You gotta apply yourself, especially because it is hard. Not because it has to be hard. It's hard because we have other things that are trying to pull us against it. So that's why sometimes days it can be easier than others, but it is an ongoing battle for us. But we have to commit, we have to apply ourselves. It's not just something we skate by and, oh, you grew up like this, everything's fine. You have that also, like, we speak to people who haven't grown up religious. And they're like, oh, the religious people, they have it all figured out. First of all, I have no idea where you got that from, but thanks. Well, they think they have Judaism figured out. And it's like, just because you see this person doing the right motions, you have no idea what's going on inside of them. You don't know, first of all, if they're battling apathy or roteness. So they just become so familiar, so they're not putting in new effort. There's not feeling that goes into it. And that's besides for all the struggles that they go through. That's the same struggles that everybody goes through. For parnas or whatever, children or whatever it is. Now, one thing that the Alter Rebbe does highlight is that everything at the end of the day, it's kam ad miser misa. Hashem Yishmereinu. At the end of the day, the effort that's required of us to either refrain from or to do what we need to do is so much easier than Mesiras Nefesh. Oh, I would do Mesiras Nefesh, of course, no problem. Why do you have to wait for that to do what you're supposed to do? Overcoming and doing what you gotta do is so much easier than, God forbid, having to give up your life for something. Okay, well, that counts for the little things also, and it's so much easier than actually dying for this. Thank God we don't have to die for exerting ourselves to do a mitzvah. That's a regular mitzvah. Especially in the country we live in today, thank God. With that all said, we go into this thing about the transcendence of Torah and Mitzvot. Now that we have the focus a little bit on transgressions and other various and what that does and how it separates and how it become lower than a gnat, etc., all that kind of unsavory stuff. Now let's focus on what a mitzvah actually does. So we know that it unites us with God, fulfilling His will and all that sort of stuff. But there's a level beyond that as well. When someone does an active mitzvah, as in not just something that's passive like thou shalt not, but you actively participate in a mitzvah, there's two gains that occur. There's two benefits, you could say. There's two things that result from that. There's this binding that occurs, the uniting with God that occurs, and also that moment is eternal. The moment of doing a mitzvah is an eternal moment. Now, refraining from idolatry, not doing a transgression, results in it prevents temporary or any sort of separation. It's a little bit more passive, is all that's saying. So on the one hand, you have not doing what you're not supposed to be doing, which is going to prevent the separation, whether it's temporary or a little bit more severe than that. But an active mitzvah actually binds us and unites us to God, and we create an eternal moment. The reverberations, the moment of the mitzvah exists forever. Why? Because a mitzvah reveals the inner will without obscurity. As in, this is what God wants. There's no more veils. There's no tzimtzumim. There's no contractions that are covering over this moment of the mitzvah. God says take yeser. God says give tzedakah, whatever it is. There's nothing that covers over that moment of doing the mitzvah. This is an actual revelation of godliness right now. And of course, Torah is an even greater revelation of godliness. There's no concealment in Torah study. Torah study is an absolute revelation of godliness. The Haggin the King and everything that occurs from that. Not only that, but there can't even have concealment there. So kliba, sitracha, all that kind of stuff, it can't be there in Torah. Mitzvah reveals the inner will, that there's no obscurity there. Ergo, as in therefore, a separation is not possible in the moment of a mitzvah. So it results in a perfect unity. This is what God wants. In the moment of doing our mitzvah, we are actively uniting with God right now, and this is perfect unity. I am fulfilling His will. And it's an eternal moment. Why is it an eternal moment? Because in the upper spheres, this union between Hashem and the soul is eternal. Why? Because it transcends time. Godliness is beyond time. God is beyond time. There is no measure. All the measures that make something physical don't exist for God and don't exist for holiness. So you can't hold holiness in your hand in the sense of, oh look, I just caught it like a firefly. You can hold holiness in your hand if you're doing the asterisk for the mitzvah. But you can't catch it. It's not physical. It's not tangible, holiness. It is not bound by the limitations of the physical world. Meaning, it is not bound by time and space. There is no matter to spirituality. It matters, but there is no matter to it. So, in a moment of doing the mitzvah, you have now created a perfect union with God, and you are also transcending time and space with it. This moment of the mitzvah exists forever. That's in the upper spheres, where there is no time and space. In this world, this occurs only when we're engaged in Torah mitzvahs, because we are within the limits of time. So in this world, while we're engaged in the Torah mitzvahs, we're creating this perfect unity, but the eternality of it exists in the higher realms. Why not specifically in this world? Because this world is actually limited by time and space. Also because when you're done, or when you're not engaged from Torah mitzvahs, you could end up doing who knows what, God forbid. Unless you were in a constant state of Torah and mitzvahs, there's a moment of disengagement or non-engagement, and anything could happen at that point. In the physical world, it's not necessarily eternal, but in the upper spheres, where there is no limitations of time and space, there are no limitations of the physical world, this moment of the mitzvah exists forever. And if that's not enticing enough, this is what the active performance of mitzvahs, this is what it results in. Well, thank God transgression does not exist like that. But we see, what more could a Jew ask for? What else could a person want from life than this ultimate unity and these eternal moments that exist forever and ever? The one thing that it wraps up with is that this is part of why Moshe told the Jewish people, Book of Devarim, before they went into the land of Israel, he told them to say Shema twice a day. Why Shema? Of everything. And also, why is it going into the land of Israel? What's with the timing of all this? Because the fulfillment of the Torah and its mitzvahs, it's dependent on the constant reminder and the constantly remembering this inyan of Mesiras Nefesh for God and for His oneness. What is the thing of Shema? Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Shema affirms, Shema declares the oneness of God. We just said the whole thing with Echad and Yachid. That is what Shema is, which is part of why it was the prayer of martyrs to say that. This is our assertion. This is the undeniable fact that we would live and die by, is that God is one. There is only God within the world. That's what Shema is declaring. That is supposed to be a reminder to us, because why? God forbid, a transgression is a denial of God's absolute oneness. That there is something aside from God, or the thought, or unwittingly, that is what allows for a transgression to occur. This is all that we did in the chapters leading up to this. Moshe told the Jewish people, you're going to the land of Israel, you're not going to see the godly revelation like you saw in the desert. The desert, you're secluded. The challenges are not going to be the challenges of the world, where you have to, the agriculture going to depend on sun, moon, rain, stars. Okay, God obviously, but you're going to have to play by the rules of nature for all these sort of things. It's going to be a different world that you're going to. There's going to be challenges, way different kinds of challenges in this world that you're going into. How do we confront the challenges? To not only remember what we're all about, but also to stick to what we're all about. So Moshe said, you'll say Shema twice a day. When you start your day, and say when you end the day. Start the day, you remind yourself what it's all about. At the end of the day, you can be like, did I remember what it was all about? Okay, make sure tomorrow remember what it's all about. What is it all about? Affirming, declaring, making good on the declaration that God is one and there is nothing aside from Him. Because God forbid, nothing that could deny that, with anything that's not God's will, and doing all the things of that affirmation and the assertion of this is what God wants. Fulfilling His will is the declaration of, the affirmation of His oneness. That's chapter 25.